So I think the most important part of that very generous introduction is the fact that I am an Ohioan, despite the fact that I've spent the better part of 20 years living and working in Washington, D.C. I imagine there's some number of you in the audience who think, you must be crazy. Why would you leave a lovely place like Ohio to go work in a place that seems awfully dysfunctional like Washington, D.C.? And if you focus only on the reality show that has become our presidential primary process, I can see why you might think that to be the case, but the reality is that there are many noble public servants working in our federal government, much like you're doing at the state and local and the community level, who are worthy of our admiration and perhaps worthy of a little comparison and contrast as well. My hope is that the research and the work that I've done at the federal government, you will see translates well and nicely to the work that you're doing in extension, and particularly around the theme of innovation and extension. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our organization just by way of level setting things and then get into what I hope will be some new information, but hopefully will also reinforce for you the good work that you're already doing. My suspicion is that once we hear the stories of the award winners this evening, that you'll see a lot of my talk and the work that they've done. That's my hope anyhow. So first let me tell you a little bit about the Partnership for Public Service. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization focused on improving government effectiveness through its people. Oftentimes when I tell folks that, they say, well, you'll never be out of a job, will you? And the reality is that's probably true. The federal government is a large and complex organization, not really a singular organization, but a series of different organizations. Many of you work with the federal government in various capacities. We're actually started by a former federal employee, a guy by the name of Sam Heyman, who heard President Kennedy's call to service in the 1960s and decided that when he graduated Harvard Law School, there was nothing better he could do with his professional career than to work in the federal government. And so he joined up. He joined the Department of Justice in the Kennedy administration and spent just a couple of years working as an attorney there. Had to cut it short because he had to take over his family's business. His father fell ill, and he took over the family's real estate business. It worked out for Sam. He didn't get to pursue his dreams, but he became a billionaire. And you can't do that in the federal government. He became, or at least do that in the federal government and not end up in jail. He decided to do something with his success in the private sector. He had remained close to folks in the federal government and was really quite dismayed by the fact that there wasn't the same appreciation for public service as there had been in the 1960s. And so he created our organization and some student loan repayment programs at places like Harvard to try and encourage folks to pursue careers in the federal government, but also to change the systems of government so that we can be better and more effective. And as David mentioned, I focus on the leadership equation, working with everyone from emerging leaders to experienced executives to figure out how they can drive the sort of change that we need in our federal government. And it's that work that led me to focus on innovation and innovation in our federal government specifically. It was probably about 10 years ago. We'd done a series of interviews with senior leaders and talked about what is it that the next generation of leaders will need in order to be effective. And what we heard consistently from senior political officials all the way down to frontline employees was that we will need to be more innovative. The expectations for government will remain extraordinarily high, but we know that the resources will not be able to keep pace with those goals. And so we'll have to find new ways of doing business. So we set about to try and figure out, okay, what does innovation look like? And initially, all we found were stories of private sector innovation. And there are a lot of good ones, to be sure. We went to places like Google, to Amazon, to 3M, to understand what it is that they did in the way of innovation. And the story of innovation in the private sector has been written very well, but we thought there could be a little bit more, so we started to dig a little deeper, and I'm going to just do a quick pop quiz. You won't be tested on it. There'll be no grade around this. I think it's finals. Is it finals at Ohio State right now? So there may be some students out there who are a little stressed about hearing that. But for you all, this is going to be straightforward. So it's just a quick game of pick the innovator, right? So I'm going to put up 3 pictures and see who you think would be the most innovative among the 3. So person A doesn't look extraordinarily innovative, but person A. Person B, maybe some of you know, I'm going to make this a little harder, though. I'm going to make his black and white too, just so we make it a little more even. And then person C. who's got I think that's a hairstyle that's back in style based around my walk around campus. But 3 different innovators. Now, what was interesting about this for me is if you actually put names associated with those pictures, the individual on the left and the right-hand side, let alone the individual in the middle, I think can all be labeled innovators. The Jonathan Baldwin Turner and Justin Smith Morrell, who are sort of historians of land-grant institutions and extension, will know that they're the fathers, the grandfathers, maybe the great-grandfathers, looking at those pictures, of land-grant institutions and what has become then the work that you all do in extension. And I guess my point of sharing this is while it's easy to pick out the IT, the tech gurus like Steve Jobs or the Google guys who are doing extraordinary work these days, you could trace back to your historic roots some really wonderful innovations too. I think that in fact, innovation is embedded within the DNA of extension. And if you think back to what they did, taking something that had typically been the sole domain of the privileged in private universities and colleges and making it accessible to folks all throughout the country is extraordinary. And then to think about what it's become through the work that you do, whether it's at the state level, reaching out to communities, or at the community level, enacting real change. It's inspiring stuff. And like I said, I hope that what you'll find is that it's not only in that sort of ancient history back in the 1800s, but it's present day as well, especially as you look at some of the awards tonight. And that's what we found in our research looking at the federal government. While you can easily point to folks like Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook or others, really the innovators are walking all amongst us. They look, just like you, average Americans to be sure, but doing extraordinary work that sadly, regrettably, doesn't sell the same sorts of newspapers that the private sector innovators do. So what we did is we set about to understand exactly what's happening there. What's the secret sauce that allows folks to succeed despite the barriers and obstacles that occur in the federal government or that occur in your work as well? And we produced a series of very short research studies. One looking at the environment for innovation in government, real snapshot on that, not good, bad. Second one, this blue-covered report, looked at the characteristics, the attributes that leaders need to possess in order to create a culture of or an environment of innovation. Share a little bit about both of those research reports with you this evening. And then the third is actually a practical toolkit that we share with the leaders who go through our various programs. So, that's the research that we've done. And what we found in that process is that a lot of the myths that exist around innovation just turn out to be false. One of the most favored approaches to innovation is creating an innovation lab. It's a nice thing to have, to be sure, but folks oftentimes get tied up with, what I need is I need a creative space with colorful walls and cabinets, whiteboards, comfortable couches, those sorts of things. What we found in our research is that is indeed a nice thing to have, but it's absolutely not an essential element. Another thing that people often say is, I need more time, right? My day job is keeping me so busy that I don't have time to do innovation. That's also a bit of a myth. And the reality is that if you do innovation well and effectively, it's a part of your daily job. Other folks will say, well, what I need is technology. Innovation is really about technology. I need better technology, a better website, what have you. That again is false. It's a means to an end, not the end unto itself, unless in fact you're working at an IT company. And even then, what they're selling is not the technology itself, but it's what the technology actually delivers you. And then last but not least, my favorite myth, or in some instances excuse, is I need an R&D budget. The reason Apple is so successful is because they basically print their own money, right? The Google guys, they could buy an island if they wanted to. I don't have those sorts of resources. We're too cash strained. The reality is that innovation loves a constraint. Innovation is really born out of necessity. And what I hope to share with you is a little bit about what we experienced in our research and what we've experienced in trying to share these tools and resources with others as well. So first thing first, just define the term innovation. What the heck does it mean? It's such a charged word. There's some people who naturally gravitate to it, love it, and then there are others who just immediately discount it and hate it. Hopefully, just by defining the term, we can find some common ground. There are two variables here that I think are important. The first is that an innovation is only innovative to the extent that it improves people's lives, right? Innovation for the sake of innovation is fun, but it's playtime unless there's a result or an outcome associated with it. That's the first thing. The second thing is that innovation really spans a continuum. It's everything from invention, which is what we often think of when we think of innovation, to continuous improvement. So I'll give you just one concrete example to reinforce the point, and then we'll dig into the content a little bit more. If you think about the cell phone, right? I just said innovation's not about technology, and now I give you a cell phone, all right? But it's for illustrative purposes. When you think about the cell phone, the invention was that Motorola brick that came out in the 1980s, right? That was the invention. It was entirely new. No one had ever seen it before. Then you look at the smartphone, and Apple's iPhone in particular, since it was the first sort of widely adopted smartphone. That was an effort by Steve Jobs and Apple Computer as an entire team of people to take what was working in their personal computing business, what was working in their MP3 player, their iPod business, and then marrying that with cell phone technology, putting it all together. They were taking something that was working in one environment and applying it to another. And then, the cell phones that we see today that come out are sort of a continuous improvement upon that previous product. So whether it's an Apple iPhone or a Samsung or whatever your favorite handset is, it's not that there's been any great breakthrough, but there's just a continuous improvement. It's a little smaller, a little faster, or now it seems like they got to be smaller to be better or bigger to be better. I don't know. I can't keep track. But you get the idea. It can be invention, it can be improvement, and in between, it can be taking something working in one environment and applying it to another. And what we found is that in order for those innovative outcomes to occur, you really need three essential elements. The first is you need the right types of people. You need innovators. Not everybody needs to be innovative all the time, but if you're looking to solve a problem that is proven to be a problem for some period of time without a realistic solution, you need innovators. I'm just going to touch upon that research briefly. The second is that you need a process. We like to think in the mythology of innovation that any invention is the act of a lone genius. There's a eureka moment. I can assure you that is not the case if you dig into the research, whether it's Steve Jobs and the iPhone or Thomas Edison and the light bulb. It has taken them a painstaking process in order to get there. I'm going to walk you through ours briefly and focus on a few, but really it's the scientific method you learned as kids in middle school. And then last but not least, there's a piece of recognition. Recognition to say that you're trying things differently to produce a better, more effective outcome. And if you succeed, terrific. And even if you fail, how can we learn from that experience? So I'll give you a few playful examples at the end to just share a little bit about that. Speaking of being playful, I should mention, there's like some really lovely desserts on the tables and nobody's eating. I have 4 kids at home, so I'm totally accustomed to folks eating while I'm talking. So go ahead and dig in, because it would be a shame to see those things sit there until the end of the night. So I'm going to walk through each of these essential elements in a brief period, and then hopefully, again, maybe it's some new insights or something just to reinforce the work you're already doing. First, leaders and people. So as I mentioned, we did a series of interviews, surveys, and focus groups with folks in the federal government who produce extraordinary outcomes. We're talking everyone from the scientist who's found a way to completely eliminate the transmission of HIV from a mother to her unborn child, to the folks who find new and better ways of acquiring the goods and services that the government's in the business of acquiring. We honored a couple of years ago a guy who found a new way of acquiring a Navy destroyer that actually saved literally billions of dollars. So it's not just the scientific and the medical innovations, it's also the practical management innovations that occur too. And we talked to all these folks from their various disciplines, their various domains, and we said, okay, what is it that's common among these folks? And we identified 9 characteristics. I know you can't read these, so I'll just give you a brief snapshot. They fall into 3 categories. There are a set of characteristics for innovators that fall into sort of what motivates herself or himself as a leader. There's a set of characteristics on how they work with their teams and inspire innovation amongst their folks. And then there's another set of characteristics around how they actually work with their stakeholder community. What we found is, just at a high level in each one of those categories, is first, in order to be an effective innovator, you need to be curious. That's an absolutely essential characteristic in order to be an effective innovator. If you're not curious, it's unlikely that you're going to be successful. You have to be genuinely curious about how things work or don't work, and what are some new ways of exploring that. And the best way to be curious is to surround yourself with other folks who are curious as well, who might have a different perspective, a different take on how to get things done. The second set of characteristics focused on leading people and teams is really, I think, in the best measure, focused on how you can cultivate talent to think differently, how you can be a coach and a mentor to folks. We found this to be true in the public sector as well as the private sector. Google did its own study of what makes for the best leaders, and they found the best leaders are the best coaches, the best mentors. So if you want to be an innovative leader, you don't want to just simply demand innovation. You want to help your people understand what does innovation look like, how can they cultivate that innovation of their own accord. And then the third characteristics I typically and affectionately refer to as my Radar O'Reilly characteristics. But as the generational demographic has changed, sometimes that falls flat on folks. So there was a show, MASH, and this guy, Radar O'Reilly, who could get anything done. Bottom line is, innovators don't complain about the system, they figure the system out and then work the system in order to achieve their noble goals, right? These are not for their personal gain, but for the sake of whatever mission, whatever activity it is that they're trying to achieve. So if you want to think about how you can identify an innovator, don't think about who looks like Steve Jobs or not, but think about who's curious, who's good at surrounding themselves with talent and cultivating that talent, and then who's able to not make excuses about the reasons why they can't get things done, but despite the barriers and obstacles, still find a way. That's the set of characteristics that you need to be focused on. So that's one essential element. If you're trying to solve a problem, if you're trying to be innovative, look for innovators and surround yourself with those sorts of folks. The second is then to give those folks a set of processes and tools that they can follow so that innovation is not based on luck, but it is based on hard work and effort. And we've defined a process in the work that we've done at the partnership. Can everybody see that okay? That's an eye test. So no, I know you can't see it, so I'm going to walk you through at a high level. Just 6 really basic steps, like I said, that in many ways mirror the scientific method. The first is to commit to innovation to build your team of innovators. The second is to really define the problem that you're trying to solve in a concrete manner, and making sure that you're not just taking it on the sort of the face value, but digging a little more deeply. The third is to actually develop new and innovative solutions to tap into your creativity. The fourth is to prototype those solutions and experiment. I'm going to spend a little time talking about the distinctions between what that looks like versus like a pilot program. The fifth step is to actually navigate change, and then the sixth is to measure your results, report those results, and then determine how you want to continuously improve upon whatever prototype, whatever experiment you've built. So, this is material I cover in the course of 2 days when I work with leaders. We're going to just touch upon 3 of these characteristics in very short order. 3 that I think are really critical to tackling the sorts of challenges that you experience in extension. So the first one I want to focus on is defining your goals. I'm just going to put up a picture and walk you through what it might look like to dig a little bit below the surface, right? So here's a picture, and when I'm working with a smaller group, I'll typically say, okay, tell me what you see, what you perceive to be the problem, and what your immediate thoughts are for a solution. And typically, the first answer I always get is, there's a trash problem here. There's coffee cups stacked up all over a ledge, and what these folks need is a trash can. And then typically there's a second person who chimes in and says, I don't know if it's a trash can problem. Maybe there's a trash can right there and it's full. And so maybe what you need is more custodial staff to empty the trash. And then a third person will chime in and say, the problem is wherever they're going won't allow beverages. Maybe you should change that rule. Maybe people should be allowed to take beverages wherever it is that they're going. Or then somebody will say, well, the problem is they made that ledge flat, so they're just inviting people to put their dirty coffee cups up there. What you need is a slanted ledge or maybe some potted plants or something like that. But once you start digging below the surface, and granted this is just a snapshot, quite literally, of a circumstance or a situation, you begin to see that there's any number of different solutions, everything from a $50 solution to a $50,000 solution or even more. And so if you want to be innovative, what you're looking for are the insights that you can gain from not just looking at the data or your first observations, but digging a little more deeply. And we oftentimes tell folks to spend their time in innovation first focusing on defining the problem and then solving it. Einstein said it much better than I could. When he said, if somebody gave me an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem and then 5 minutes defining the solution. So when you think about the challenges that you're trying to explore in extension, you might want to think about that same sort of rule, right? If we were to divide our time up, probably 95% of it should be spent actually thinking about the problem. Now, I should note also that I have two siblings in the audience, both of whom are Ohio State grads, not Bowling Green grads. One of whom is a math teacher, and I imagine right when we're done, he's going to say, 55 out of 60 is not 95%. You got your percentage wrong. But I'm not a mathematician, so we'll take that offline. But you want to think about this, and you want to go beyond the data. There's a real great sort of movement afoot about big data, right? If you think innovation is a buzzword that you hate, big data is the one that I just cannot stand. And it's because there are a lot of great insights that can come from data, but ultimately, innovation and decision-making is a human endeavor, right? It's not anything we're ever going to be fully able to automate. And so what you want to do is actually go beyond the data. Start with data, to be sure. It's a useful starting point. But begin doing some observations, right? If we were to go back to that picture of the coffee cups, we wouldn't rely on just a snapshot. We might observe people in action. And then maybe we'd have some open-ended conversations with them to say, okay, can you tell me why you put your coffee cup there? There may be any number of different reasons as to why they're doing that. Maybe they're making the best possible decision they can. So how can we make their decision to throw away that coffee a little bit easier, a little bit more effective? And how can we engage folks in particular at the extreme ends of the spectrum? This is one of my favorite techniques for innovation because it really does derive great insights. If you're a researcher, you're taught to find statistically valid means of either identifying the average, the outliers, and what have you. For the purposes of innovation, what you're really looking for, not the average, you're looking for the exceptions. So what can they tell you? When we started doing our research on innovation, we talked to a company called IDEO. They do a lot of product design. You may not know the company, but you know their products like the Swiffer mop. They design toothbrushes and things like that. And they said, when we design a toothbrush, we don't talk to a room of people like this, your average teeth brushers, right? What we want to do is talk to a dental hygienist, or maybe somebody who's lost their teeth due to poor dental health. Figure out what's going on for them so that we can design something that is a breakthrough. Not sure we quite got there yet on toothbrushes, but you get the idea, I hope. I'll give you a more concrete example, perhaps a more compelling one from the work that we've done. These are a couple of folks. They don't look at all like Steve Jobs, nor do they look like they're from the 1800s. This is Mark Johnston from the Department of Housing and Urban Development and Susan Angel from the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I don't know if any of you have any interaction on the efforts to end homelessness, and in particular end veterans homelessness. But this has been a move over the course of the last 6 to 8 years. And Mark and Susan in particular were tasked with the responsibility of leading that effort. And just as I described in terms of defining the problem, they spent some time on data analysis, and they discovered a lot of information that was quite interesting. But they also spent time in first-person observations and interviews with homeless vets themselves. So, Mark would look out a place on Skid Row in LA, but that's where he spent his time to figure out what's going on. Or they might also talk to folks who actually did get off the streets and found themselves a stable home. What they discovered in that process, both through the data and in the conversations, is that the approach to solving homelessness was completely backward, right? So the presumption was, in order to get a homeless vet off the street, first you've got to address all the other problems that are affecting their lives, right? Maybe they have some mental health issues from post-traumatic stress disorder, maybe they have some substance abuse issues, and once you get them sort of clean and sober, then you can get them into stable housing. Turned out that was exactly the wrong way. It would work some of the time, but not as frequently as it should. And instead, they reverse engineered it to say, okay, no, actually, what you need to do is get someone in housing first. You got to get them off the street, right? Because it's not a good place to be homeless, right? Like you actually are looking for ways to forget about your problems, and too oftentimes substance abuse may be an easy answer. So let's get them off the street, and then we'll work on addressing the other issues. And what they found is by making that one change, that the percentage of homeless vets has dropped precipitously by about 50%. There are actually some cities that have completely eliminated their homeless vets population. So if you define the problem well first, you can find the right solution, and sometimes it's not the obvious answer right in front of you. So that's one thing that I would mention in way of process steps. A second I would mention is around the process of developing your creative solutions and recognizing, again, that this is not an individual effort, but it is, in fact, a team sport. So not Einstein this time, but Ed Catmull, who's the co-founder and CEO of Pixar. And he talks about, what was it that has led to Pixar's success? And this is a common debate among the entrepreneurial, the startup community. And oftentimes what they say it's the idea. You need the right idea, and then once you get the idea, then you can have success. He said, no, you got it backwards. What you need is the right team of folks. Then the ideas take care of themselves. If you get the right people on board, the ideas will come and quickly and quite naturally. And I think you have a built-in community, a built-in team, an extension. You obviously have folks at the state level and then at the community level as well. Some of you work with folks at the federal level. Think of them as teammates, and not just those folks in an official capacity, but also the people you serve. And what is it you might derive from interacting and working with them? You need to set an optimistic tone as opposed to the pessimistic one we often confront in today's working environment. How might we find new solutions to the problems that we're experiencing? I'll give you one story, another one from the federal government. This is Nicole Nelson-Jean. She's an employee at the Department of Energy. At the time that we discovered her, she was just shy of her 30s and had responsibility for negotiating an agreement with what in essence was the former Soviet Union, former Soviet military officials specifically, to secure their nuclear materials. Right? So if you want a job done well, you give it to a 29-year-old and you send her off to Siberia. And what she immediately discovered is that, number one, the more experienced folks who had tried to do this work before failed, and oftentimes failed miserably. In large part because, number one, they felt like they were demanding things from the Russians. The Russians felt the same way, of course. And she decided there was another way. Take a more optimistic mindset that together we can find solutions where they've not previously existed. And she spent most of her time just developing relationships with these folks. First through translators and then more personally getting to know them, know a little bit about their families, what was motivating their behavior. And while we, sort of love to demonize our enemies, what she found and discovered is that they did have a shared set of goals, and they were able to find a way to negotiate an agreement together, genuinely together. First by taking a personal interest in their motivations, but then by finding their shared interest in a solution. They, in fact, succeeded so well that they moved beyond that to discover a whole set of systems they can put in place to ensure the safety of those materials. I also like to note for Nicole, she ended up getting some much better assignments then. After Siberia, she went to Japan, then to Vienna, and now she's based in DC, so it's another hardship assignment for her, unfortunately. But the real key here is finding the partnerships, the community that you need in order to succeed. And I think you have it built in, and maybe you just need to look around the room a little bit, look beyond your tables, in fact, to see how you might make connections that will help you explore and identify new solutions and new possibilities. Okay, the last thing on the process step, and I promise I'll be quick, is just in terms of thinking about prototyping and experimentation. Now, folks are often afraid of innovation because they say, you know what, the stakes are too high, we cannot fail. And the reality is that you need to fail in order to learn and ultimately to grow, to do something new and different. So I go back to Einstein here. The purpose of a prototype is not to prove that you're right, it's actually to prove that you're wrong. And too often times we get excited about pilots, but a pilot program is really a program or policy that we're sort of too afraid to put out there as the final product, and so we put it out there as a pilot, but we don't want anyone to say that there's a darn thing wrong with it, right? We want it to succeed and at all costs. And if we get negative feedback, we defend it and we excuse it. But a prototype is really, it's the 24-hour, the $24 solution, right? You want to try and test something out in the safety, the sanctity of your conference room or with a close set of colleagues, and whereby you can really poke holes in the process. So I'll give you some visual illustrations of what a prototype looks like so you can see the distinction between that and a pilot. So I doubt that many of you do the sort of product design that I'll share here. Again, these are from our friends at IDEO, but here you have, these are old too, because nobody's going to give you new innovations, right? Because they're afraid that proprietary information will leak out. This is a palm spring, handspring visor. It's a company that's out of business, and the work has been overcome by smartphones. But before they built their software, they just gave folks a casing and a stack of Post-it notes to say, how might you use a tool like this to discover the insights that they need? Or maybe you're designing a product. This is a surgical tool. You see the finished product above, but the one below is actually a dry erase marker, a film canister, a clothespin, and all Scotch taped together. But that was enough for the surgeon to say, okay, this is exactly the type of tool that I need to get started, so much so that they actually replicated the ridges of the marker cap on the final tool itself. You never know where the insights are going to come from. I imagine the work that you do, it's less about products and models. It may be more about relationships. How do you get people to work together effectively at all different levels, all different parts of the community? A relational map is just a quick and dirty way you can see this is definitely not even a $24 solution. This is a sheet of flip chart paper and a Sharpie marker to say, okay, who are the people that are either affected by or inputs into the system? Where are the relationships strong? Where are they weak? And what do we need to do in order to ensure a different kind of outcome? Or maybe a journey map or a process map, not sort of the in-depth business process re-engineering that consultants do, like I used to do, but something that's much more rapid. This is a map looking at an emergency room, and if you could see the type, what it says is basically you go to the hospital, you wait to be seen, they do something, then you wait to be seen, they do something, you wait to be seen. It's just this sort of like continuous cycle where the patient is oftentimes left in the dark. How can you improve a process like that? You don't need to do a full business process map to understand that things can be different. And last but not least, and perhaps the most important probably for some of the work that you do, is a role play. Now, it's the one that folks hate the most because you look ridiculous. These poor folks, they must have gotten permission to have this snapshot shared. Somebody's talking into a bottle of glue, but the point here is that by actually playing out a circumstance, particularly when you're delivering a service, you can learn something in the process. We always test out anything that we teach on ourselves before we deliver it to federal leaders. And in this instance, we did a role play around trying to improve recycling in our office. It was just a small little challenge that we wanted to try and address. And we thought, well, gosh, everybody in our office can read. So all you need to do is print up the recycling rules, hand them out to folks when they're hired. So some people already know the folly of this effort. It's all said and done. Well, what happens, when someone's hired? You get reams of paper, right? When you're brought on board, and everything goes into a file folder except the tax forms and things that you need to fill out. Nobody reads those things. And we discovered what to many of you is already obvious when we did a role play to see what it would look like. And so we changed that process, but we wouldn't have defined that insight or that outcome until we actually did it. But the point is, this is, other than the person actually taking the snapshot, a safe environment, right? You're afraid, you don't need to be afraid to make a mistake. And the point of innovation is to scale your prototype, your experiment in such a way that you reduce the risk. A few just key questions to ask yourself. What's the cheapest, the quickest way to build our concept, to test our concept? How can we put it in an environment where it goes live? Who do we need to ask for permission to do it? What sorts of obstacles can we anticipate? And what are the measures? Both the measures of success, but also the indicators that we're off course, and what can we do about that? What can we do differently the next time we build a prototype and experiment? So I want you to think about those sorts of process steps as you think about innovation and extension. The last thing I want to say is about recognition, and that is the last topic, the last essential element. And here you have to know your culture, right? There are some environments, like tonight, it's a lovely dinner, where you want the formal sort of approach. On innovation, especially if you're trying to reinforce and cultivate that environment, maybe something a little bit more real-time, perhaps you want to be a little bit more playful. I'll give you a few examples. One, there's an agency that I know at the federal level that gives out a giraffe award for innovators who are willing to stick their necks out and do things differently. Now, these are for folks who both succeed and who fail, but fail in such a way that they prevent the real horrible disasters that affect people. They do it in such a way that allows them to test the idea before it actually would affect anyone. Something I used with my team is something we call the Book of Awesome. We're quite fond of ourselves. It's just an empty journal, but I would close every staff meeting asking for folks to give examples of others who've done extraordinary work over the course of last week. And they would just write it down on Post-it notes, and we have 3 volumes of the Book of Awesome. We're really good. It was a great way for peer recognition and to reinforce the sorts of innovative behaviors we were looking for from folks. And then my favorite, and I can't lay claim to this, and this is with some risk myself, but there's the Cowbell Award. Now, I know from the groans, some of you are familiar with the Saturday Night Live sketch with Will Ferrell, where he plays a musician whose only instrument is the cowbell, and the producer only wants more cowbell, despite the other musicians' best efforts. And this was a playful piece of recognition that was adopted by a very senior federal leader who was in the midst of a culture change within the organization. And he had very specific characteristics and behavior that he was looking for. And what he said is, anytime someone would exhibit that, he would give them a cowbell and make a very public proclamation that what I want is more cowbell. So maybe Will Ferrell's not your inspiration for recognition, but you want to think about what's going to work for your office and for your community, for your innovators. So if any of you are interested in learning more about the work that we've done around innovation in government, it's, I think, directly applicable to what you're doing in Extension. You can look at any one of our reports. You can find them at www.ourpublicservice.org. Or let's give those Google guys the credit. Just put in innovation in government, partnership for public service, and you're going to find everything that you need. But I thank you very much for your time this evening, for the opportunity to share a little bit of our work. Appreciate the opportunity to be inspired by the work that you're doing. It's really quite extraordinary. I'm eager to hear about the great work that you've done over the course of the last year. And in my own piece of recognition, I want to thank my sister Julie, who's responsible for bringing me here. Julie Fox, as you know. Yeah, let's give her a round of applause. So basically, I've always done what my sister has told me to do, and that's the reason I'm here tonight. And really grateful for the opportunity to spend some time with you and to hear about your work. I hope this has been of some help. Maybe there's some insights, but more than anything, I hope it reinforces the good work that you're already doing. Thanks very much.